the moment is the Davis Commission and the government deciding whether to build a new airport or new runways. And that will be going on all this year, and there are going to be campaigning opportunities at that. There are real issues about whether Britain can actually afford to have a new runway, let alone a new airport. The forecasts of air passengers have been going down in the government's forecasts since 2000. The figures in the forecast they produced just in January this year were about 5% down for 2030 and for 2050 than the forecasts in 2011. And those were 5% or so down from those in 2009 and so on. So the numbers of passengers being predicted now is far less than they used to be. And there's a piece of work done a year or so ago by the Aviation Environment Federation based on the 2011 figures that said that actually by 2030 there was no need for a new runway because there'd be only 3% of too much demand for the existing airport capacity. In fact, the figures are now down a bit, so the newest forecasts are 5% down. So that means that really, if the airports behave sensibly and use their capacity well, there'd be no need for a runway between now and 2030. So in terms of carbon emissions, one of the big problems we have is that in recent years, everyone has said aviation emissions are controlled by the emissions trading system in the UK, in the EU. And that was sort of starting to work until in November, the EU were persuaded by international pressure from China, India, and so on, to stop the clock on their ETS system because there was so much complaint by foreign countries about not wanting to buy carbon permits. So at the moment, only flights inside Europe are part of the ETS scheme. And they won't be, flights outside or to and from Europe won't be included until the end of the year. That is unless ICAO, which is the UN body which deals with international aviation emissions, can come up with something sensible. It has worked for years, it has worked really hard at not finding any solutions to aviation emissions, and it is unlikely to find any good solutions now. So in theory, Europe will reinstate its emissions trading system for aviation after November, because ICAO is unlikely to come up with anything better. But at the moment, we have that as a big uncertainty about aviation emissions. And also the fact that aviation is not included in the UK Climate Act. It's taken account of in the Climate Act, but is not actually included. And in December last year, the government decided that it would not be officially part of the carbon budgets. It should be, and the Committee on Climate Change has said that it should be part of the carbon budgets. But at the moment, a decision on that is being held off until 2016 for the 5th carbon budgets. So aviation is kind of in limbo at the moment. It's not properly under the ETS. It's not properly under the Climate Act. And so Howard Davies is having to make his decision on future airport capacity based on huge uncertainty. It does look as if the UK aviation gets a very beneficial deal. It gets special treatment because whereas other sectors must cut their emissions on the 1990 level by 80% by 2050, aviation, as far as the guidance goes, need only cut their emissions to the level of 2005 by 2050, which is really more than double the figure it was in 1990. And so where they can keep their emissions at the same level, other sectors must make massive cuts. And it is not at all clear other sectors can make the huge cuts, which would enable aviation to grow the way it wants to grow. So this year, Davies has got to decide what he's going to do about this. And he's got various consultations going on, which people can get involved in responding to. We don't yet know when there'll be one on climate during the year. But at the moment, there's one on the process of how he does his work and on the criteria to be used on assessing which airports might be taken forward. And he will make recommendations by the end of the year which airport schemes to take forward. It obviously hasn't occurred to him that he might not take any forward, because when there was a meeting with colleagues at which John was present recently, he was asked what he might do with the next 2 years if he decided a runway wasn't needed, and he sat back in his chair and there was a sharp intake of breath, and he put his hands together in thought and said, well, think about it. It hadn't occurred to him that obviously the commission was intending to plan some runway somewhere. What we would like is that when the committee finally does make its recommendations, it does put in a big proviso that actually it may not be possible under the climate science. But the final conclusion won't come until 2015. So meanwhile, there will be some campaigning possibilities during the year, and we can keep you informed what people can do, because Davis is meant to be very open to comment. He's meant to be publishing all submissions on the website, and in theory it's a very open democratic process. And so there may be opportunities to comment during the year and to lobby. But at the moment we don't know which airport schemes will be taken forward, and there'll be more campaigning to do in the next few years, depending on, as obviously he won't decide at the end of this year that no runway is needed, which we hope. But there are real issues with the climate science, and probably a runway can't be fitted in with UK climate targets. The industry is very, very good at its PR. It says it is absolutely indispensable to the UK economy, and for some reason we're all go to hell in a handbasket if Heathrow can't expand, if all airports can't expand. In practice, 23% of flights are business, 30% at Heathrow. The rest of the flights are holiday flights or leisure, visiting friends and family. They're not vital for the economy. They take money out of the country. So in fact, building airports is not vital to the UK economy at all. It's vital to the airports but business, it's vital to the airline business, it's not vital to the UK economy. So there's a lot of uncertainty this year, but it'll be interesting.
Thank you.